Have things gotten any better with Sumit's family?
No.
No?
You've been accepted and they love you, then what else you want?
Told your mom, I told your dad.
Are you out of your mind or what?
But I can't live there. I
Baby.
can't. I don't want to go back to America, but you
No,
need to
this
do
is-
something
no.
for us.
This sounds like threatening.
Is divorce in the cards?
It depends on him. I am at my breaking point, and Sumit needs to stand up and do something.
Sumit froze when he saw the small bag sitting by the door. At first, he thought it was another impulsive thing, a temporary gesture, something he could dismiss like the arguments that had become background noise in their marriage. But the way Jenny was standing there, quiet and still, made him pause. There was a weight in her eyes he hadn't seen before, a sharpness that cut deeper than any fight, any complaint, any past frustration. Something had shifted, and he was only just noticing it. This wasn't another round of tension he could ignore. This was a turning point. Jenny didn't rush to explain. She didn't need to. The bag was saying everything, a silent declaration that her patience had limits and that the rules had changed. Weeks of feeling unheard, unseen, and trapped had built up inside her until it overflowed in this single, deliberate act. Sumit's stomach sank as he realized he had missed all the signs along the way. Her smiles had been thinner, her laughs forced, her words clipped. He had mistaken calm for contentment, quiet for acceptance. And now it was almost too late to read the room correctly. Every rule, every expectation, every tiny moment where he prioritized comfort over connection flashed before him. He saw how the house had started feeling less like a home and more like a stage for control. He remembered moments when she had pulled back during conversations, when she had nodded without saying what she really felt, when she had moved to another room instead of confronting a fight. He had ignored all of it, and now, looking at the bag by the door, he understood this wasn't just a warning. It was a signal that Jenny was halfway gone emotionally. The tension wasn't temporary. The stakes weren't small. Something fundamental had broken, and everything about their relationship hung in the balance. Even before the bag appeared, the cracks had been visible, hiding in plain sight. Sumit noticed the change before he fully understood it. Jenny was still there, physically, but the energy between them had shifted. She no longer lingered over conversations, no longer laughed the way she used to, and the little updates about her day felt clipped, rehearsed even. Where once she had poured her thoughts into him, now she offered small neutral responses, almost like she was protecting herself from getting hurt. Her patience was shorter, her expressions measured, and the warmth that used to fill their home had dimmed. He mistook it for her being tired or busy, but in truth, it was her way of creating distance, a buffer for the inevitable. On screen, viewers could see the subtle signals. She would sit in silence longer, scroll on her phone without engaging, nod along to his questions without really answering. Past Jenny had argued, had pushed, had made her presence felt. Current Jenny was quieter, her withdrawal speaking louder than any argument ever could. Sumit's laughter at the TV seemed to bounce off her walls instead of landing on her. The connection they had relied on felt thinner, almost fragile. Every time he tried to probe, she deflected with a small shrug or a simple, non-committal, okay. The more he ignored the distance, the more she reinforced it, each retreating into herself while still maintaining the outward appearance of normalcy. It was a slow goodbye disguised as everyday life. Sumit thought things were fine, that the quiet moments meant peace, but each unspoken tension was a warning, a subtle signal that her emotional investment had shifted. He was blind to the patterns, reading calm as stability, missing the signals hiding in plain sight. He didn't realize that her emotional shutdown wasn't avoidance, it was preparation. The silence was louder than any argument, and Sumit had no idea what it really meant. Every rule, every expectation, every unsolicited instruction had piled up over time. Unnoticed at first, Sumit's parents were present, well-meaning in their own way, but their influence seeped into every corner of Jenny's life. And decisions that used to feel simple now required permission or justification. Where she once had confidence, she started second-guessing herself. Where she once had space to breathe, she started shrinking, moving through the house carefully, weighing every word, every gesture. Control had a subtle rhythm, one that slowly wore her down until she no longer felt fully present in her own marriage. On screen, this was visible in the small gestures. She deferred to their suggestions before speaking her mind. She held back opinions that could spark conflict. Even when Sumit asked for her take, she hesitated, aware that any choice could ripple into an argument with his parents. Long-term control doesn't have a headline, it whispers. It's the accumulation of small adjustments, repeated silences, the internal tally of what's safe versus what's worth the fight. Each concession added to her fatigue, and every compromise started to feel like erasure. Sumit noticed frustration in her eyes, but misread it as exhaustion from daily life. He saw calm in her compliance and assumed stability. But Jenny wasn't passive. She was protective. She had begun building emotional walls before she ever said a word to him. This wasn't rebellion. It was preservation. Her mind was preparing for options, calculating, deciding how much of herself she could risk giving away before it hurt her irreversibly. The power dynamic wasn't about overt battles. It was about the quiet shift of influence. The longer she felt small, the more she shielded herself from disappointment. The more she recognized that she alone had to safeguard her emotional survival. Jenny had started choosing herself quietly, even before Sumit realized the depth of the problem. Sumit had a habit of framing tension as ordinary, as if every fight, every silence, every subtle withdrawal was part of life's normal rhythm. Weeks of visible strain became just stressful days in his mind, and he convinced himself that time would smooth everything out. He saw arguments as temporary inconveniences, not as warning signs of deeper cracks forming beneath the surface. On screen, this pattern was obvious. He smiled, he joked, he carried on with daily routines, pretending nothing had shifted. While Jenny's expressions told a different story, he delayed conversations that mattered, hoping clarity would arrive without effort. He postponed decisions that could have eased friction, instead of believing that patience alone could repair a growing emotional divide. Every act of avoidance became a small reinforcement of denial. He assumed that silence meant peace, that her quiet compliance signaled contentment. What he didn't see was that patience can't fix pressure, and pretending normalcy in the middle of chaos only allows the underlying tension to grow stronger. Jenny, in contrast, had no patience left for pretense. She had lived inside the lie of normal tension for too long, and the emotional cost was visible in her every gesture. Her gaze drifted more often. Her responses tightened. Her interactions became measured. Sumit, wrapped in his habitual mindset, mistook restraint for calm, compliance for understanding, and postponed recognition of the true stakes. The irony was that by normalizing every warning sign, Sumit had created a dangerous blind spot. The patterns he had relied on to maintain equilibrium were now the very traps that left him unprepared. For the first time, he would face a moment where pretending everything was normal would no longer work. Sumit's eyes caught the screen, and his heart skipped. Something small, almost ordinary, blinked back at him from Jenny's phone. And yet, it carried weight heavier than anything he had anticipated. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a fight. It was a subtle signal. The kind that accumulates slowly until it can't be ignored. On the show, these moments often surface in ways that feel accidental, almost incidental, but their impact is anything but minor. A timestamp, a notification, a glimpse of a plan, or confirmation, it was enough to break the rhythm of assumptions he had been clinging to. The realization hit him slowly at first, then with a sudden jolt. His mind raced, trying to rationalize, to reframe, to shrink the moment down to something manageable. But he couldn't. Every detail he had overlooked now screamed clarity. Jenny had been preparing, planning, and emotionally detaching long before he saw the evidence. What he had dismissed as quiet compliance, as patience, as calm, now revealed itself as strategic distance. Viewers could see the shift in his posture, the way his chest tightened, the flash of something between guilt and shock in his eyes. It was a recognition that he had misread her, that his habitual avoidance had left him unprepared for the consequences of inaction. He realized that the tension he had normalized was in fact the warning signal he should have acted upon. Jenny's approach changed instantly. The protective veil she had maintained around his feelings lifted. There was no cushioning now, no quiet deflection. She was present in her own terms, and the emotional responsibility no longer rested on him. The small accidental revelation became the point where he could no longer ignore the truth, and Jenny stopped softening the edges of reality for him. Sumit froze again, this time not at a bag or a glance, but at the weight of a choice he had been avoiding for weeks. On screen, It was clear that his pattern of delay had become a barrier between him and Jenny. Every time she had signaled her frustration, every time she had pulled back, he had told himself that waiting, hoping, or softening the edges would resolve the tension. But indecision has a cost. It is not neutral. Every moment he postponed action, every time he avoided confrontation, he was quietly giving up influence over the outcome of his own marriage. Jenny, meanwhile, was reading every hesitation, every pause, every attempt to placate without addressing the core issue. On screen, her expressions revealed comprehension and impatience. She wasn't blind to the pattern. She understood that indecision wasn't harmless. It carried meaning. To her, each delay was either fear or disregard, maybe both. The silence became louder than words, and her emotional withdrawal deepened. She had been preparing for options he hadn't even acknowledged yet, mentally rehearsing boundaries, packing her autonomy, and protecting herself from the cost of his inaction. Indecision is often mistaken for compromise or reflection, but in relationships, it can function as control. By not choosing, a person dictates the pace and outcome without facing accountability. Sumit's habitual avoidance had created a silent tension that left Jenny holding the weight of emotional labor alone. On screen, viewers could see the growing chasm. A partner present in body but absent in action. A slow erosion of trust and certainty. The stakes were now undeniable. The house held more than conversations. It held consequences. Every step forward or backward would carry real meaning. Jenny's boundaries were set, her patience thinning, and the moment of reckoning loomed. The door, the bag, and the unspoken ultimatum made it clear. The moment of truth was just seconds away. The room felt electric. Jenny stood by the door, the bag at her feet, her posture steady, controlled, yet carrying the tension of weeks of unseen struggle. Sumit knelt before her, hands hovering uncertainly, trying to read the moment, trying to find the words that might undo what had quietly built between them. On screen, every gesture screamed conflict without a single line of dialogue. Jenny's eyes were sharp, holding him accountable in ways that words couldn't capture. Sumit's gaze flickered, a mixture of fear, regret, and desperation, realizing that this was not another ordinary fight. The parents lingered, rigid and watchful, sensing the shift in authority and energy. Their presence, once central to control, now amplified the tension, making every decision, every glance, every pause feel monumental. Jenny's calm was strategic. Her silence carried weight. She had long stopped negotiating her presence. She had moved into protection mode. The bag, the barrier, the quiet withdrawal all signaled a potential exit, a boundary that couldn't be crossed without acknowledgement. Sumit reached for compromise, for reassurance, for evidence that love alone could restore normalcy. But Jenny's body language, the distance she maintained, the way she anchored herself near the door, suggested a line had been drawn. Every hesitant move, every pleading glance, highlighted that staying or leaving was no longer a simple choice. It was a reckoning of priorities, respect, and autonomy. On screen, viewers could feel the unresolved nature of their relationship. Nothing was final, yet everything had shifted. The room held the question that had been looming from the very start. Was this a warning, or was it goodbye? The answer remained suspended, leaving hearts racing and minds questioning what would happen next. As the camera fades, the tension lingers. Jenny's next move could redefine everything, and Sumit's response may determine if this is the beginning of a reset or the first step toward permanent distance.